let me, if I could, introduce Dr. Kim Madden, who is an assistant professor at McMaster University. She's the research manager at St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton, working for the Department of Surgery and the Department of Health Research Methods, Evidence, and Impact. I've known Kim now for well over a decade, and have seen how she has been able to move from the area of coordination into leading large studies. So more than aptly qualified to be talking today, and I'm really excited to hear her talk. I will have Kim introduce our keynote today. Welcome,
Hi,
Kim.
everyone. So I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, who is my friend and colleague, Dr. Ellie Landman from the Deventer Hospital in the Netherlands. I actually worked directly alongside Ellie on a few of our trials, our international trials. I coordinated from the Method Center and she coordinated from her hospital. It worked out great. And yeah, she's a good friend. We've known each other for about 4 years. Take it away, Ellie.
Thank you, Kim, for introducing me. And well, thank you for having me to do this talk today. Let me see. Okay, so me and Kim were invited today to talk about what we as research coordinators do and how do we do it. So I will start with the part from as a research site that participates in these international studies, and we also do our own studies. So when I'm asked what I do when I'm at work by random people, I usually say I arrange everything related to clinical studies in our hospital at the Department of Orthopedics, which still doesn't say what I actually do. So people usually just nod and say, okay, that's great. So to give a little bit more of an insight, I would like to start by giving an example of what my day could look like. So I might start with completing CRFs for a patient in one study. We might have a new study upcoming, and I would do a feasibility check to see if we can participate in this study. And we usually have some studies ongoing which are initiated by our own department, and I would be involved in writing the results and the paper. Then somewhere at the day I might be meeting with the pharmacy to discuss how we can arrange our participation in a drug study, or later on I would see a patient or contact the patient by telephone for yet another study. So that gives a little bit of an idea of the versatility of the tasks that I'm usually doing on a day. So when asked, what do we do? I can generally say this in a few sentences, which I will go into detail about later on. So our main job is to ensure a study is compliant with all regulations, such as good clinical practice, to make sure that we follow all the rules and regulations. In the end, we make sure that the study that we do delivers good quality data, because if there's no good quality data in the end, then the study might as well not have been done. And maybe most importantly, we make sure we protect the safety and well-being of study participants. And to do all of this, communications with all the parties involved is one of the major things to do. And all of this before, during, and after the study is finished. So before the study starts, some examples of tasks to do. They depend on whether we participate in one of these multi-center studies that Kim mentioned, or if there's a study that we start up from the beginning by ourselves. So in the last case, I'm involved in protocol development. We might apply for funding if needed. We do the ethical approval approval, we have to set up the database, make sure we know which data to collect in the study. And if we participate in one of the multi-center studies, we start by checking the feasibility, if we can do the work that is needed to perform the study. So do we have the time? Do we have the patience? Just to make sure that once we decide to participate in the study, it will be a success. Then one of the next steps will be contract negotiation. Setting up the documents needed, usually also for the ethical approval in the country. And then once we get to starting the study, there's training the study team, making the standard operating procedures so everybody knows what their task in the study is. Then during the study, a big important part of the tasks is to screen the patients, to get the patients to sign informed consent. So have all the contact with the patients, make sure they know what they get into, schedule the follow-up, make sure all the data is collected the proper way. If needed, do the safety reporting, but also if for some reason enrollment of patients in the study is not going as planned, make sure that all involved clinicians, for example, are reminded that we do the study, that it is important for them to identify the patients that are eligible for the study, to make sure we can optimize the enrollment of patients. And also, especially for studies where the follow-up is longer and follow-up is more than just the standard visits of patients, to make sure that we do contact the patients, we don't lose the patients, so that we actually have a complete follow-up for all patients that we enroll in the study. And then once the study is done, it's important to make sure that all the documents we collected, all the data we collected is complete. Then again, if the study is not a multinational study, but the studies that we start up and complete as a hospital by ourselves, I'm involved in writing the paper, doing the data analysis, also inform the patients about the results of the study, because a lot of patients want to know what they contributed to, but also close the study in a proper way. So dispose medication if there was medication involved in the study, make sure all the finances are correct, and also evaluate the performance of the study, the participation in a study, to make sure that we optimize the way we do studies. So we learn from previous studies and if needed, do better in the future. So as I mentioned before, communication is one of the most important parts in the work, because it is there in all the steps, and there are a lot of different parties involved in making a study a success. So first of all, there's the sponsor and the PI, which are the main people to communicate with. I think depending on how a site specifically fills in the role of a research coordinator, you're kind of the person in between the sponsor and the principal investigator and all the other people involved. So that could be the pharmacy, but also administrative staff, the other medical staff that is involved. Everybody who is involved, the ethics committee. So you're the first person people talk to when when you need to get things done, but also when things go wrong, they come to you, and yeah, things need to be solved. And also one of the important things I think in this is communicating with people that might not be part of the study staff, but that are confronted, so to say, with the study. So nurses and administrative staff, the secretaries, who are the first people to be contacted by patients when they have questions. I think it's very important that they all are, yeah, in their own way involved in the study, or at least know about the study, what is the yeah, most important things to know, so that they are also supportive of the study. So as for the role of a research coordinator, I think in my experience, I stand together with the clinician who is the principal investigator in the study. So there will always be the principal investigator who is responsible or who has the final responsibility in the study, and who delegates a lot of the tasks to the research coordinator, but also to the other team members. And I think this collaboration makes it a strong yeah, connection, makes the team the way it should be. The clinician brings his own skills and knowledge, the clinical knowledge, the practical insight to how yeah, standard care is being done, for example. And the coordinator brings in the methodological knowledge, which is, well, it depends on the clinician, whether, like, how developed this knowledge is, but also to keep the overview of all the different steps involved in the study, especially if there are several studies ongoing. Looking at all the tasks that I mentioned in this presentation, I think it makes clear that it's difficult to keep track, especially if there's also the clinical responsibilities to take care of. And for the coordinator, there's also a big advantage, which is time. So the clinician can focus on the clinical work. He's involved in the studies, but most of the time-consuming tasks are done by the coordinator. So for coordinating research, I think it's important that a research coordinator keeps the overview of all the tasks, all the steps involved in doing the study. One of the things is that a research coordinator can accelerate processes like the ethical applications, but also sometimes it's a job of the research coordinator to put a brake on things. For example, when a clinician wants to quickly start his study and is a little bit too eager sometimes to wait for all the yeah, all the paperwork to be done. Then I think making the processes involved in doing such a study, yeah, for others is a big advantage to yeah, to get people to be engaged in the study, and also to motivate the study team to yeah, to kind of advertise the importance of the study and make sure that people keep their attention to it and make the best effort to yeah, to perform and make the study a success. So altogether, I think good research is a team effort where all the team members have their own specific role, and they're equally important to make a success of each study. So with that, I would like to give the word to Kim to continue.
Thanks, Ellie. I'll just figure out how to share my screen here. All right. All right. So thanks, Ellie, for that really good overview of what clinical coordinators do, primarily at a site who's participating in a clinical trial, or as a single center trial that you've initiated as well. I'm going to talk about maybe a slightly more specialized aspect of being a research coordinator, and that's conducting international trials, multi-center trials. Before I became a PI myself, I had about 8 years of experience with Dr. Bandari as his clinical research coordinator for some of the trials. These are some of the ones that I worked on with Mo for the past couple, past almost a decade, I guess, which is crazy to say. Yeah, so these are all international trials that we worked on. They were very large. They were supposed to be high impact. Some of them are still ongoing. I was the main coordinator for some of them at the Method Center. I was sort of a backup or, sort of a supplementary role in others. There's tons of roles you can take in multi-center trials. They're very large and complex. Mo can talk about this for ages, but I'm going to briefly just go over why would we even want to do large international trials in the first place. So I'm sure some of you have some ideas of why you would want to participate in large international trials. Some of the reasons are that large high quality RCTs are actually at the highest level of evidence if they're done correctly. I'm sure we've all seen this hierarchy of evidence pyramid. And it's true that trials are complex. They are very difficult to do, actually. It sounds nice on paper, you're a nice big protocol, but it may actually be really difficult to execute properly, and you need lots of money for them. They can be, multi-millions of dollars, depending on the size and complexity and all of that. But when we get down to it, they actually do result in perceived influence and impact and actual influence and impact on the practice of orthopedic surgeons. So this is really interesting. This is a study that Mo did a little while ago. We can also see from some of MacOrtho's big trials, so the sprint and flow trials, we did some sub-studies that showed that small trials can actually be misleading. And I like this study because it probably has one of the best titles in the history of orthopedic studies. So we can see here, this is from the sprint trial. And if we look at the top there, after 35 patients, it looks like unreamed nails are going to win versus reamed nails. But if we actually get down to our 826 patient, like the full target of the study, we can see that reamed nails were actually better than unreamed nails. If we had just stopped at a small trial, we probably wouldn't have got the same answer for sure. But, we probably think that the bigger sample size is more truthful than a smaller sample size. And similarly in the flow trial, in the pilot, there was no significant difference, but it looked like soap might win. But in fact, we found when we got to our almost 2,500 patient full target that soap was actually harmful and saline was significantly better than soap. So these are just two examples from two of our large trials, why methodologically we would want to do large trials. International multi-center collaboration is also important if we want to get these to this large sample size. Sometimes a single site can't do it themselves. You just don't have the patient volume. More sites can mean faster enrollment. You have more PIs enrolling, a greater population at the same time. You can do a bunch of things simultaneously. And that often leads to financial efficiency, which is beneficial for the accounts. More countries can also mean greater generalizability of the results, which is really good for application of once we've done the trial and we have our results, actually applying that into practice. And again, another Mo study, he did a survey of surgeons a little while ago, and these are some of their responses to why they want to participate in multi-center randomized control trials. And I added my own to the end, saying that it's more fun than single center trials. I find that it's just exciting to be part of something so big. You make new friends, you get to travel to fun countries. Yeah, so I really enjoy doing it. This may be slightly out of date, but as of about a year ago, this was our MacOrtho list of countries that we actually have collaborators in. So we're running trials in all of these countries. We've probably added a few more by now that I'm not aware of. But yeah, it's been a pretty big journey. Mo has gained this huge network, and then other investigators have come on, and we've added our networks to this. So yeah, it's pretty big. How did we get all of these sites? It's a pretty big process. It took us, maybe 2 decades to get to this point, but you have to start somewhere. So how do we actually find our potential sites to be involved in these trials? It's going to depend on your trial. So it's going to depend on, whether you're in sports medicine or trauma or, whatever, whether it's a large population or a small one. We like to first go to our existing network. So people who we know, we're friends with, we know that they're going to be interested in this study. They maybe want to be collaborators on the papers. And then we can actually ask that network to talk to their network to see if we can get sort of a friend and snowball the sample. We've also used a website approach. So for some of our hip fracture trials, we had the International Hip Fracture Research Collaborative, I think, IHFRC. We ended up having a website where people could go to it, and if you're a surgeon who deals with hip fractures, you could sort of fill out a form and it would come to one of the coordinators, probably me, at the Method Center. And we ended up getting a couple of collaborators this way. I think we ended up getting a whole bunch of people in Spain, if I recall correctly, and that snowballed from there. So that was really helpful. We can go to conferences and talk to people who have presented on similar topics to us, search publications for, maybe we're looking at doing a robotic arthroplasty trial. So we searched it for publications of robotic arthroplasty because it's a fairly small world. So that's helped us a lot. You can actually, depending on the study, if it's a device trial or a drug trial or something, you can talk to product reps to see if they can actually tell you who's using the products of interest. So now that we have built our list of potential sites, how do we actually select sites? Ellie actually talked about this from a site coordinator perspective. You get this feasibility questionnaire and you want to know if it's feasible for the site. So we actually, at the Method Center, we want to know if it's feasible for the site too. It gives us pretty good information. If they only see 1 or 2 patients a year, is that going to be the volume that we're looking for? If they don't have enough investigators at the site with the expertise that we need, maybe it's not going to work for them. If they don't have enough time, they have too many other studies going on, or maybe they don't have the research staff. It's really important for them to have a research coordinator who's dedicated to this study because the PI may think that they can do it themselves, but it very rarely works out because Ellie went through all the things a research coordinator does. It's very administratively heavy. The PI is not going to have time for that. So it's really helpful to know things like how many coordinators do they have and that kind of stuff. So it's important for us to know. So once we get this feasibility questionnaire back, we make a decision on whether this study will work for them or not. So we have our list of sites ready to go. What do we do now? So we do what we call study startup, and we usually have a checklist for this. This is actually from we have a research coordination book, and I think Mo can show it to you at the end. This is one of the figures from that. So after we've identified and contacted our sites, we send them the feasibility agreement. It's really important to have a negotiation of the budget usually so that we're happy with what money we can give them. They're happy with what money they're receiving for the services that they're providing us. And then we negotiate on things about all the legal stuff behind trials, jurisdiction and intellectual property and what the actual scope of work is going to be, all kinds of stuff. So we usually have lawyers or contract specialists involved in that at each institution that's involved. We make sure that all the regulatory approvals are in place at each site. So not only do we as the Method Center have to have our ethics, our Health Canada or FDA approval, whatever else we need, cannabis license for cannabis trials, we also have to make sure that each individual site has all that in place. So we usually help them by giving them all the documents that they need to apply to ethics. Maybe they need some translation if they're a country that speaks a different language than us. So maybe we can help them get translated questionnaires, all that kind of stuff. So that's what we deal with in the regulatory approval stage. And then typically we would have a site initiation visit. It can be done in person, which is often fun for me, but it can also be done remotely to save a bit on the budget. So we usually review all the protocol and study procedures with everyone, make sure everyone knows what they're doing, how to randomize, how to select patients into the trial, and then what to do afterward, what the follow-up visit schedule is. Yeah, just make sure everyone knows what they're doing, including the pharmacists and the nurses and everyone else who's involved in the trial. And then we say that they are activated. So we usually send a letter or something that says you are officially activated, which means you may start patient recruitment whenever you're ready. And that can mean giving them access to the randomization system and the electronic data capture system or anything else that you need to do, depending on the trial. Sending them the study drug or study device, all that kind of stuff. So usually the Method Center takes care of all of that. So once we have everyone started up, we can't just coast. Our job is not done yet. So we have to make sure that all of the sites are motivated. So in one of our hip fracture trials called Health, I think we had 60 or 70 sites at one point in like 12 countries. So sometimes people, they say that they're interested in the trial, but then they sort of forget about it because they have other stuff going on. So we like to keep in frequent communication with these sites just to make sure that they remember we exist, that they're motivated to keep going, and just to get some information on maybe they're having some barriers to enrolling patients or something. So we help them troubleshoot that a little bit. We also keep the methodology consistent across sites and across countries. So there may be some little regulatory differences or whatever, and we try and keep it fairly consistent across sites. Because you can imagine if you have 60 or 70 sites, people are going to do things slightly differently, and we just try and keep that as level as possible, according to the protocol. We also try and keep the budget on track, which is really important. So I've done a lot of like managing finances and making sure that we have enough money to pay all the sites after we've paid ourselves, and just making sure that we can keep up our end of the budget arrangements, and that we're not going to run out of money before the trial ends. Maintaining data quality. So sites, they submit their data to us, and then we usually validate the data, sometimes in duplicate. So we just make sure that all of the data is complete, and it's sort of up to our standards of how we want it, because people can collect data a little bit differently across sites and countries. So we keep that consistent as well. We also like to monitor follow-ups, so making sure we're not losing too many people to follow up. Maybe one site's having a really hard time for some reason, so we'll help them troubleshoot how they can follow up with patients better, monitor for crossovers. So if there's one site has a whole bunch of crossovers, we try and help them get at the cause of why that's happening and how they can fix it. Paying sites is important because that goes back to keeping sites motivated. If you're not getting paid, you're probably not going to enroll. So it's really important to keep up our end of the budget agreement again. Newsletters and meetings. So we like to keep everyone updated frequently. This could just be like, a monthly, hey, this is how many patients we've enrolled. Keep it up, guys. You're doing a great job. Here are the best enrolling sites, that kind of thing. Or we can, if we've noticed an issue that a lot of people are having, we can communicate in sort of a formal way about what we can do about this. And then, maybe annually at the Canadian Orthopedic Association or whatever, we would like to have a meeting with all the investigators that are there and do sort of an updated training just to make sure everyone is still on the same page and still knows what they're doing. And we also maintain regulatory documents throughout. So we make sure that our ethics is up to date, everyone else's ethics is up to date. If we have to submit any amendments to regulatory, like Health Canada or FDA or anything like that, that's all done. So we take care of all the central regulatory documents as well. So great, we finished the trial, our enrollment is done, our follow-up is done. We can just stop, but no, it doesn't work that way. There's still lots of work to do after the trial is done. So usually we're involved in a lot of the data cleaning, just making a last check to make sure that everything is complete, accurate, and consistent. We lock the database after that. We close out all the sites, so that means making sure everyone has submitted closeout documents to their ethics if that's required, telling Health Canada or other regulatory bodies that, yep, this trial is done, all kinds of stuff like that. We close out our accounts. So most institutions require that once the study's done, the account is done as well. So we just make sure we've spent as much money as we can, all the money is in the right accounts that they should be, we've paid everyone that we have to pay, and the balance is as close to zero as possible. Sometimes we can be involved in the analyses or in any of the papers that are coming out. I used to manage a lot of the authorship, so people would request to be an author, and we would put them on this study or this study, and then all of the documents that we need to submit it, manage all of that. Sometimes you need to report to regulatory bodies at the end of the study or to clinicaltrials.gov or something like that. So we would manage that as well. And then planning for the knowledge translation and even the next studies. Coordinators can be involved in all of that. Obviously, this is going to be done in conversation with the PI, but usually the coordinators can help a lot because we know where we've been with this research program, so we can also project where we're going.